a prophet stands in the dust of Jerusalem and sings a heartbroken song about a hillside that only yielded bitter fruit. You start to realize the agricultural setting is not accidental at all. The vineyard is not a metaphor for human effort. It is the topography of God's heart. But there is a dark side to this agricultural economy. The grace of the landowner deeply offends the people who think they earned their place in the sun. They want a ledger. He offers a family. And just a few days later, that religious offense is going to turn violent. There is a profound human instinct to claim ownership over what we did not create. We are handed a life, a community, a patch of cultivated earth, and we are asked to steward it. But slowly, the stewardship curdles into entitlement. We start to believe the sweet fruit belongs exclusively to us. We forget the bruised hands that cleared the heavy limestone. We lock the gate and pretend the cultivator does not exist. When Jesus stands in the temple courtyard just days before his death, he tells a story that strikes directly at this fatal flaw. And he begins by quoting Isaiah almost word for word. He describes a landowner who planted a vineyard, put a wall around it, dug a wine vat, and built a watchtower. The religious elite, standing in the courtyard, know exactly what he is doing. They know the ancient song. They know they are standing in the Kiram. But Jesus alters the narrative. In this version, the landowner does not immediately tear down the wall when the soil yields nothing. Instead, he leases the ground to tenant farmers. To plant a vineyard in the ancient Near East is not a weekend project. It is a vulnerable, agonizing act of hope, and travels to a distant country. When the season turns, he sends his servants to collect his portion of the grapes. The tenants do not just refuse the request. They turn violent. They beat one servant, kill another, and hurl stones at a third. The blood soaks into the exact same soil the landowner painstakingly cleared. Finally, the cultivator sends his own son, assuming they will at least respect the flesh and blood of the heir. But the tenants see a legal loophole. They look at the son, standing unarmed among the vines. They do the cold, brutal calculus of first-century inheritance law. If they eliminate the heir, the property defaults to the current occupants. So they grab him, drag him outside the stone walls, and leave his body in the dirt. The murder of the son is not a tragedy of misunderstanding. It is a hostile takeover. The religious leaders listening in the courtyard realize Jesus is talking directly about them. They are the wicked tenants. They have taken the sacred space God entrusted to them, the temple, the law, to the people, and they have claimed it as their own exclusive property. They have beaten the prophets, and in just a few days, they are going to drag the true heir outside the city walls. You do not just scatter seeds on the ground and wait for the spring rain. You have to break the earth open, to bleed out on a Roman cross. Jesus looks at the elite and delivers the final verdict. The vineyard will be taken from them. The physical temple in Jerusalem is a corrupt, barren hill. The stone walls are going to come down one final time. But the vineyard itself is not going to disappear. It is about to relocate. It does not move to another physical mountain. It moves into a rented room. A heavy wooden door closes against the cold night air. Outside, the streets of Jerusalem are choked with Passover crowds, the bleating of sheep, and the heavy boots of Roman guards on the cobblestones. Inside, a flickering oil lamp casts long shadows across the stone walls. Men recline around a low, rough-hewn table. The smell of unleavened bread and crushed grapes hangs in the thick air. Jesus holds a cup of dark red wine in his hands. He looks at the terrified faces of his closest friends. He has just told them he is leaving. Their chests are tight with panic. And in the middle of that suffocating fear, Jesus looks at them and says 5 words that change the architecture of the cosmos. I am the true vine. For 700 years, the nation was the vine. The physical temple was the watchtower. You haul heavy limestone boulders out of the dirt until your hands bleed, stacking them one by one to build a protective wall. The law was the stone wall, but the vine withered. The wall failed. The soil turned toxic. God had planted a vineyard, and the tenants had murdered the heir. So the cultivator does the unthinkable. He does not plant a new garden in the dirt. He does not build another physical fortress of stone. He is not pointing to a piece of real estate. He is pointing to his own chest. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. With a single sentence, Jesus takes the entire tragic, blood-soaked history of Isaiah 5 and rewrites the ending. The failure of the past is absorbed. The burden of perfection is lifted. The branch does not have to strive to become the vine. The branch does not have to manufacture its own life source. The branch only has to stay connected. He looks at these 12 men, knowing one of them has already walked out into the dark to betray him, knowing the rest will scatter before morning. He knows their failure is imminent, but he does not demand they produce a flawless harvest by dawn. He tells them to abide. But how exactly does a branch stay connected when the physical presence of the vine is about to be dragged outside the city walls, beaten, and nailed to a wooden beam? How do you survive when the roots themselves appear to be ripped out of the ground? You swing an iron pickaxe to carve a wine vat directly out of solid bedrock. You build a watchtower, hauling heavy timber under a relentless sun. To answer that, you have to look at the exact Greek word he whispers into the candlelight. John chapter 15, verse 4. We are so familiar with the English translation that the edge has been completely sanded off. Abide in me, and I in you. It sounds like a gentle, cozy invitation. It sounds like a suggestion to read your Bible a little more often, or sit quietly in a comfortable chair. But when you look at the language of the first century, the word Jesus chooses carries a radically different weight. The word is the Greek meno. John loves this word. He uses it 40 times in his gospel and another 26 times in his letters. It is his absolute favorite theological concept. It means to stay, to remain, to tarry, to dwell. But it implies a fierce, enduring resistance against anything that might force you to leave. It is not just about lingering in a room. It is about holding your ground when everything else is trying to tear you away. In the context of ancient agriculture, meno describes the biological grip a branch has on the thick wooden trunk. Think about a grapevine caught in a violent Judean storm. The wind howls through the terraced hills. The rain lashes against the rough bark. The temperature plummets. The branch does not survive by trying to produce grapes in the middle of a hurricane. It survives by doing exactly one thing. It remains. So you can stand guard over the tender shoots to protect them from thieves and foxes. It takes years of grueling, unglamorous labor. That biological reality changes everything about how we understand spiritual growth. For centuries, humanity operated under the crushing pressure of Isaiah 5. We thought we had to manufacture our own righteousness. We thought God was the distant landlord demanding his quota of good deeds, and if we did not produce enough sweet fruit, the stone wall would come down. We exhausted ourselves, trying to squeeze spiritual fruit out of dead wood. But Jesus shifts the entire burden of production onto himself. The roots dig into the dark soil. The heavy trunk draws up the water. The sap pushes its way through the wood. The branch does not strive. The branch simply acts as a conduit. Abiding is not a spiritual checklist you have to maintain. It is a biological reality you surrender to. Fruit is not a quota you have to meet to avoid the fire. It is the inevitable consequence of where you choose to stay. If you detach a branch from the vine, it does not matter how much you water it, how much sunlight you give it, or how hard it tries to be a good branch. The leaves will turn brown. The wood will become brittle. It will wither. But if it stays connected, if it's simply menos in the vine, the grapes will grow without a single ounce of anxiety, before a single grape is ever harvested. It requires a staggering amount of patience. You have to invest your sweat, your wealth, and your time. Jesus is telling the men in that room that the horrific history of the failed vineyard is finally over. The true vine is here, and the cultivator is walking through the rows, pruning with precision, ensuring that the life of the roots reaches the very edge of the branches. But this is not just a comfort for a terrifying night in Jerusalem. The story of the vineyard is pulling toward a final, spectacular climax. A prophet sang a heartbreak song over a fertile hill, and God revealed the grief of a betrayed cultivator. The protective stone walls were torn down, and the wild boars of empire rushed into the ruined garden. A landowner hired desperate stragglers in the fading light and handed them a scandalous, unearned wage. Tenant farmers dragged an heir outside the city gates to bleed, and the kingdom relocated from a physical mountain to a living body. A teacher held a cup of crushed grapes in a rented room and declared himself the roots of a new humanity. The pressure to manufacture our own righteousness was shattered, and the exhausted branches were finally allowed to rest. The true vine absorbed the violence of the storm, and the sap of resurrection flowed backward into the dead wood, into a living thing that could easily be wiped out by a single season of bad weather or a sudden blight. Same soil, same cultivator. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the dirt under the fingernails. In Isaiah's original song, God is not a distant supervisor looking at a ledger. He is the one hauling the heavy limestone boulders out of the earth. He is the one swinging the iron pickaxe to carve a wine vat directly out of solid bedrock. The story of the Bible is the story of a cultivator who simply refuses to abandon his plot of land. If you are in a season where you feel like a failing branch, where you are terrified that your leaves are turning brown, where you are exhausted from trying to squeeze spiritual fruit out of your own fragile efforts just to prove you belong in the garden, John chapter 15 is a place to sit. Abide. May know. The vine is not asking you to perform. It is asking you to hold your ground. Fruit is not a quota you must meet to avoid the fire. It is the inevitable overflow of simply staying close. If this reached something in you, subscribe. Leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who is completely exhausted by the pressure to manufacture their own righteousness. And when the biblical authors looked for a way to describe God's relationship with his people, this was the exact image they reached for. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. And may the God who planted his own heart in the dirt to hold you fiercely in the storm and bring forth a harvest you never could have grown on your own. Not a distant monarch demanding taxes from behind the safety of a palace wall, but a cultivator, a landowner with dirt under his fingernails. A landowner hands a silver denarius to a man who worked 1 hour, infuriating the man who sweat through 12 under a burning sun, investing everything he has into a plot of land that might turn around and yield absolutely nothing. If you only read the New Testament parables in isolation, you get a fragmented picture. You might think the story of the workers in the vineyard is just a lesson about economics. You might think the story of the wicked tenants is just a sharp warning to the religious elite. But they are not isolated stories. They are echoes of an ancient heartbreak. To feel the weight of what Jesus is actually saying when he talks about vines and branches, you have to go back 700 years before he ever stepped into that upper room. You have to start with a song. And the part that makes this song remarkable is who is singing it. When we read the ancient prophets, we usually expect anger. We expect fire and brimstone, shouting from the city walls, and dramatic declarations of doom. But in the 5th chapter of the book of Isaiah, the judgment does not begin with a shout. It begins with a love song. The 8th century BCE was a time of unprecedented economic explosion in the capital city of Jerusalem. The elite class was rapidly expanding their estates, pushing out the poor, and manipulating the courts. The religious rituals were still functioning perfectly, the incense was still burning. A gang of tenant farmers drag a bleeding heir outside the stone walls and leave his body in the dirt. The sacrifices were still bleeding on the stone altars, but the society itself was rotting from the inside out. Isaiah looks at this glittering, wealthy, hyper-religious city and declares it an agricultural disaster. He stands in the public square and sings about a beloved friend who planted a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He describes the grueling labor in deliberate detail, the digging of the trench, the clearing of the heavy limestone boulders, the planting of the choicest red vines, the construction of a stone watchtower and a wine vat carved directly into the bedrock. The listeners in Jerusalem would have nodded along. They understood the mechanics of agriculture. They knew how much sweat and wealth went into an ancient hillside plot. But then the song pivots. After all, the agonizing preparation, after doing absolutely everything right. The cultivator comes looking for a harvest. And instead of sweet, plump grapes, The vines produce bushim, stinking things, bitter, sour, toxic berries that make the mouth pucker and the stomach turn. At this moment, God steps out from behind the metaphor. He declares that the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are his pleasant planting. God is the exhausted cultivator. The people are the toxic vines. A teacher sits in a candlelit upper room, holding a cup of crushed grapes, and tells his terrified friends that he is the roots. The wild grapes were not a failure of the soil. They were a betrayal of the cultivator. The heartbreak in this ancient text is staggering. God asks the people a rhetorical question that echoes through the centuries. What more was there to do for my vineyard? That I have not done in it? It is a devastating theological question. It implies that God had exhausted his own resources of grace and protection. He had given them the law, the prophets, the temple, the covenants. He had built a fortress of love around them. And the consequence of their failure is not an active punishment. It is a withdrawal. God says he will simply remove the hedge. He will break down the stone wall. He will let the briars and the thorns take over. The Assyrian and Babylonian empires are waiting in the wings, ready to trample the cultivated hillside back into a wasteland. But to understand exactly what broke the heart of God, to understand what those toxic berries actually represent in the daily lives of the people, you have to look at the specific language Isaiah uses to describe the harvest. Because in the original Hebrew, he does something brilliant with the words. Isaiah stands in the dusty square. The sun beats down on Jerusalem. The smell of temple incense drifts over the stone walls. Same soil, same pattern. You see it again and again. Whenever the biblical writers need to describe the absolute core of how God relates to humanity, the crowd gathers. They listen to the song. Then Isaiah drops the metaphor. Isaiah chapter 5, verse 7. He points his finger at the men of Judah. He delivers the verdict. The word your English Bible translates as vineyard is the Hebrew kerem. It appears over 90 times in the Old Testament. Its root implies something sectioned off, something noble, something guarded with absolute, fierce devotion. A kerem is not a massive, impersonal commercial farm. It is a prized, walled garden. It requires the cultivator's constant, physical presence. You see the exact same word in the Song of Solomon. The bride sings, "My own kerem I have neglected," using the vineyard as a metaphor for her own body, her own heart. It is the language of intimate, fierce love. That root changes everything. The vineyard is not an economic asset God manages from afar. It is an intimate relationship he sustains with his own hands. But the relationship is broken. The grapes are rotten. God planted a kerem to produce a specific fruit. He looks for justice. He finds bloodshed. He looks for righteousness. He hears a scream. In the Hebrew text, Isaiah uses a devastating sonic wordplay. The words sound almost identical. He expected mishpat, justice. He found mispah, bloodshed. He expected tzedakah, righteousness. He heard tseh, akka, a cry of agony. The courts are rigged. They do not point to a throne room. They do not point to a courtroom or a battlefield. They point to a patch of cultivated earth. The widows are starving. The orphans are ignored. The wealthy elite add house to house. They join field to field. They leave no room in the land for the poor. The religious festivals continue. The sacrifices keep bleeding on the altar. But the fruit is toxic. The people think their rituals are the harvest. God says their rituals are just dead leaves. The kerem has failed. The soil is cursed. And so the cultivator makes a devastating choice. He steps back. He lowers his hands. He stops pruning. He tears down the stone wall. He lets the wild boars rush in. He lets the thorns choke the red vines. He lets the foreign armies march across the beloved soil. The hedge is gone. Jerusalem burns. The people are dragged away in chains. And for centuries, the vineyard lies in absolute ruins. But the image of that broken wall does not disappear. It haunts the nation, because hundreds of years later, Someone is going to walk into Jerusalem and plant something new in the exact same dirt. A wall does not fall all at once. It crumbles stone by stone, untended and forgotten, until the wild things finally breach the perimeter. We understand the mechanics of exile. We know what it feels like to have the protective structures of our lives come down. Most people assume the vineyard is just a convenient agricultural metaphor. They figure Jesus lived in a first-century agrarian society. So, naturally, he talked about farming. The tragedy of the historical exile is not just that Babylon marched across the desert, swinging iron swords, and burned the city to the ground. The tragedy, the detail that haunts the collective memory of the nation, is that the cultivator let them do it. He stepped aside. He opened the gate. For centuries, the memory of Isaiah's song becomes a ghost story. The prophets weep over the withered vines. The poets write psalms about the broken hedges, asking God why the wild boars are allowed to ravage the tender grapes. The people look at the ruins of their nation, the smell of ash still lingering in the cracked earth, and they wonder if the soil is permanently cursed. If you have ever looked at the ruins of your own carefully cultivated plants and wondered where the gardener went, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the centuries roll by in silence. The physical temple is eventually rebuilt with heavy stones. But the spiritual harvest remains bitter. The religious elite return to their rituals, stacking impossible rules on the shoulders of the poor, missing the heart of the cultivator all over again. The thorns of legalism choke the soil. The Roman Empire arrives with its marching boots, casting long shadows over the terraced hillsides, extracting taxes and blood. We read these parables and assume the vines are just background scenery, simple props used to teach a moral lesson about working hard or being fair. The land feels desolate. The promised harvest feels like a myth. But a vineyard is not defined by its winter. It is defined by its roots. The silence was not an abandonment. It was a preparation. The cultivator was simply waiting for the season to turn. He was waiting for the ground to soften. He was preparing to step back into the dirt himself. And, when the time is right, a new voice begins to speak in the villages of Galilee, walking past the actual vineyards of first-century Palestine. But when Jesus finally resurrects the ancient metaphor of the Kerem, he does not start by rebuilding the stone walls. He does not start by threatening the vines with fire. He starts by overturning the entire economy of the harvest. A landowner walks into a dusty marketplace at dawn. The air is cool. Men stand against the stone walls. They need bread. They need work. He hires a crew. He promises 1 silver denarius, a standard day's wage. They walk into the vines. The sun climbs higher. It is 9 in the morning. He hires more. It is noon. The heat is blinding. The dust chokes the lungs. He hires more. 3 in the afternoon. He hires more. 5 in the evening. The light is fading. Only 1 hour of daylight remains, or producing good spiritual fruit. We think the story is about us. But if you trace this specific image all the way back through the Hebrew scriptures, he finds the stragglers, the men nobody else wanted to hire. He sends them into the dirt. Sunset arrives. The day is over. The foreman opens his leather pouch. He starts with the 5 o'clock crew. 1 hour of work. A heavy silver denarius drops into a dirt-stained hand. The men who started at dawn watch this happen. They do the math in their heads. If 1 hour equals 1 silver coin, 12 hours under a burning sun must equal a small fortune. They step forward. They hold out their hands, their muscles screaming from the labor. 1 denarius drops into their palms. They are furious. They pick a fight. They accuse the landowner of being fundamentally unfair. And the landowner asks a devastating question. Are you envious because I am generous? Jesus takes the ancient image of the vineyard and completely subverts the economy. In Isaiah, the vineyard was a place of strict expectation. God demanded a yield and found bitter fruit. But here, Jesus introduces a new kind of cultivator. He is not desperately trying to extract labor from his workers. He is using the vineyard as an excuse to give his wealth away. The coin is not a wage. It is a rescue. The kingdom of heaven does not operate on an hourly rate. It operates on the scandalous, overwhelming generosity of the one who owns the soil.